This episode is brought to you by Honda. When you test drive the new Prologue EV, there's a lot that could impress you about it. There's the class-leading passenger space, the clean, thoughtful design, and the intuitive technology. But out of everything, what you'll really love most is that it's a Honda. Visit honda.com/EV to see offers.
Hello and welcome. This is the Female Athlete Podcast, Hear Her Sports, a podcast for everyone who loves stories by and about women striving to improve and make a difference in their lives. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery. In every episode, I introduce a female athlete or woman in the business of sport through a thoughtful conversation about who they are and the terrific work they're doing. My guests and I explore the glorious and frustrating issues in sports, history, equity, training, nutrition, and so much more. I am so glad you are here listening. Thank you. Today, I am talking to Elizabeth Holden. Elizabeth is an avid roller derby player, a blocker with Madison Roller Derby since 2015. Her debut novel, Mighty Millie Novak, was released this year and is about a young roller derby player dealing with all the things teens deal with. But because Millie is an athlete, there are lots of topics in the book that I found relatable and fun to follow as an outsider looking in. This episode is packed with good stuff. Elizabeth and I talk about writing the book, Millie being flawed, discovering muscles and an athlete identity, body image, starting a team sport later in life, what is awesome about derby, balancing serious training with everything else as an adult athlete, her love of performance and hitting people, plus dealing with injuries. Also, Elizabeth has insightful thoughts to add to this year's discussions about confidence. To order Elizabeth's book, Mighty Millie Novak, go to the show notes page where you will find a link to our bookshop page. Or go directly to hearhersports.com/bookshop. Ordering books through Bookshop is a way to support us because Hear Her Sports receives a small percentage of every order. Be sure to stay on the Hear Her Sports Bookshop page while you are ordering. The Hear Her Sports logo will be in the upper left corner. Today's conversation was recorded on Election Day. I can hear the little bit of giddy, hopeful optimism that I had that afternoon. Well, we know how that turned out. To read my thoughts on election results, go to the show notes page where I have linked to the newsletter edition titled, I Just Can't. If you aren't a subscriber already, be sure to sign up for future newsletters from the light blue banner at the top of hearhersports.com. Well, let's get on to meet Elizabeth Holden. Well, hello, Elizabeth. It's fun to have another Elizabeth on the podcast.
Yeah, I know. It's always exciting.
Yeah. And I think we also have a lot in common, which is also fun. I mean, for example, you said that you're always in search of unstructured time, but immediately fill any vacuum in your calendar with new projects. I love that. Yeah,
it feels inevitable.
The list of projects available are endless.
Yeah.
And fun. Yeah. I also feel like we need to acknowledge that today is November 5th and we're recording on Election Day in the US. I'm feeling a little, I don't know, verklempt.
Yeah. I'm like 100% anxiety. So I'm
totally. Yeah. But I realized a couple days ago that that anxiety level was just increasing by the hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I related to sports. In 2016, I went to a roller derby practice that night and I remember it so vividly. And so I almost planned to skip tonight's practice, but I then decided, no, I should go there and be a positive person for the people in my league who are more stressed out than me and go do this, thing that feels like a celebration of life. That sounds like, forget I used the phrase celebration
No, I
of life.
think
that sounds like a thing when people die, but it's like a positive, uplifting environment. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to be superstitious. I'm going to go to practice and do something positive.
Yeah.
So.
And I do think that is what sports brings. It's this moment of being able to come together and do something active and get rid of some of the anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I do that thing otherwise where I'm just refreshing the news as if that'll control it. Yeah.
Right. And we're not supposed to hear anything for ages. So,
Right.
you
Yeah.
can come back from practice and
Yeah. Absolutely.
still torture yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's plenty of time to torture myself before and after
Exactly.
practice. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Uh, well, I want to start talking about your new and your first book. It's the same
Yeah.
book, because I think there are a lot of things that we'll end up talking about throughout the conversation, that will reference topics that come up in the book. And just to orient everybody, the book is Mighty Millie Novak, and it is, I'm quoting here, a YA novel about an anxious queer teen girl growing up as an athlete and a person as she goes through her first season on a junior roller derby team. And I will also add that I really liked it. It
Oh,
was
I'm so
fun
glad
to
to hear
read.
that.
Yeah, no, it was fun. And I would have liked that book when I was a kid back, in high school
Yeah.
or whatever. So thank you for writing it, for
Oh,
sure.
thank you. That's good to hear. This would be
Has
so much more awkward if you hadn't liked it. So,
well, I probably
yeah.
wouldn't have had you on.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, how did it come about that you wrote the book? I know that you've long written stories, but why this one?
I mean, I think that I had the idea kind of tooling around in my brain for a while that I wanted to write a YA novel about roller derby. I had written another novel that I had been submitting to agents and querying them and trying to find a literary agent, and I was just sort of querying it into the ground as opposed to working on anything new. And I knew, like, okay, I gotta write something new at some point. And I just kind of had that floating in my head. Sometimes, like, at night, I'd be picturing, like, I originally thought it would be like over the course of the season, but from the perspective of like 5 different people on the team, maybe like switching chapters. But then the more I thought about it, the more Millie came into focus and I pictured her story a little more clearly. But then I wrote it in the summer of 2020. So I think that's the main reason this story came out when it did, as it did. I missed my roller derby league so much. And so this is sort of like my love letter to the sport in this time when our sport was shut down because of COVID. And so I couldn't practice with my team. I couldn't, you know, have that physicality. I couldn't have the like socializing and connecting with people. And so I think it all kind of came out in the book.
Are you Millie?
No, I'm not Millie, but we do have some things in common for sure. I mean, I'm 42, so I think I'm more stable than Millie, but
She was not stable.
yeah. But I mean, there are definitely parts of me in her, and there are also parts of me that are smaller than I can imagine. What if this was a bigger issue? What if this was a slightly different issue? And like extrapolate and build into somebody else.
Mhm.
So
I don't
yeah.
read YA novels on the regular. So, I mean, is this unusual? I mean, like I'm old. So if I look back to the YA novels I was reading when I was in high school or even before that, this book certainly would not have been out there available to me. So, I mean, again, is this unusual, or what do you,
I
what are you
mean,
finding?
I think there are a lot. I mean, it's a really different YA scene than even like, even 15 years ago, I mean, it's like, it's changed. I think YA has become such a huge part of the book industry, and it's gotten a lot of different niche topics within it. And so like sapphic sports romances, a whole thing that you can find, books about different sports, books about queer teens, books about, teens with anxiety, whatever. Like there are a lot of books like that. There aren't a ton about roller derby, which
Right.
is part of why I wanted to write it. Because I think a lot of times when derby gets written about, it gets written about as if there's a character who's never heard of the sport coming to it. And it's sort of I don't know. I was like, there's room for many stories. This is a legit sport, just like there's plenty of books about soccer or football. But I think there are other books similar. The one thing I've heard from a lot of people is that Millie is so, flawed seems harsh, but she's definitely not perfect. And she does a lot of really cringy things, and that feels more real than some other protagonists who are a little bit more role model. Which, side note, that's a good derby name now that I say it, if you spelled it Roll. But, I think she does have a messiness to her that is perhaps a little less common in books.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely one of the notable qualities of Millie was that she did these cringy things, and you're like, oh god,
Yeah.
and sort of this combination of like, oh, I can see myself having done that. I mean, maybe not
Yeah.
everything all at once. I mean, she was doing it in a short period of time, but
Yeah.
it certainly was like, oh yeah, like she's messing up. I liked it.
Yeah.
I liked that
Yeah.
part.
I mean, like, who doesn't mess up when they're a teenager? Like, who's
Right,
perfect? Like, that doesn't interest me.
right. Did you have like things that you had to think about writing this book about roller derby? And you know, sure, people know about roller derby, but there are plenty of people who don't know it about roller
Yeah.
derby.
Yeah, that was one of the main challenges was like figuring out how to write it in such a way that diehard derby fans are going to read it and connect to it, but also someone who knows nothing about the sport can follow it. And so the main thing is I really didn't want to do like an information dump in the beginning where it was like separate section that just explains how the sport works cuz I don't know, I feel like people wouldn't that's not that interesting. But at the same time, I couldn't assume that people knew stuff. So I really tried to find that balance of like, how can I sort of ease into things like the opening chapter with the 27 and 5 assessment, where it's just skate this many laps in this many minutes. That's easy to grasp. And then sort of wading in and seeding in conversations where like it wouldn't make sense for her to talk about what a jammer is with her teammates, but it would make sense for her to talk about it with one of her parents, maybe,
Mm.
and like thinking about how to bring in information in a slow way and keeping it as simple as possible without being too simple, like without making it so it doesn't actually look like the real sport, because keeping it true to life was really, really important to me.
You play roller derby yourself, which is, of course, how
Yeah.
you know all of this stuff. Can you talk about like how you got involved in roller derby? And I heard on another podcast that you were on that you said that you were not sporty. So I'm curious, like how you
No.
ended up doing roller derby.
Yeah, I mean, roller derby was my first team sport, and I was 34 when I joined. And so it was a head trip, to suddenly be playing a team sport when I was the sort of person picked last in gym class as a kid. I did ballet as a kid and I did martial arts, but those are both, I mean, they're both physical, but they're very solo things. They're not team sports, and they're not, I mean, it's just a very different environment. And so I had moved to Madison, Wisconsin right after I got my master's. I graduated, I moved up here, and they had just recently formed the roller derby team. So there were a lot of advertisements for it. And so I started going to games sometimes and just thought, oh, it's so cool. Like what I do like from, I don't know, from when I took ballet and just my general personality is I like being on stage. I like the performative aspects of things. And I'm like, they're wearing cool outfits. They have punny names. Like, I love this. And at the time, it was sort of, if you're good enough at skating, you can try out and try to get on a team, but that's it. And I was like, I know I'm not. And then eventually they formed a recreational league where anybody could join, but they only took people in like twice a year so they could kind of teach you how to skate with like dedicated lessons. And so I just kept being like, yeah, maybe next year, maybe next year. And the thing that finally got me to join is my sister said she was going to do it, and I got real jealous. So I was like, well, if she's going to do it, I have to do it. And then she ended up not doing it. She later joined for a little bit, but at the time, yeah, we did not join together. I was like at the first meeting going, where are you? And she's like, hey, you didn't get my text? Oh, so yeah, I think I just joined because I thought they look so cool. I may as well just try the rec league just for a little bit and see how it is. And then I just fell in love with it like almost immediately. So much so that I was getting up for like 7 a.m. practices on a Saturday, which is
That's
really not
love.
in my
Yeah.
nature.
Right. What was it that you liked so much? I'm always fascinated when people find a sport. I mean, because as you said, it wasn't like you weren't active,
Yeah.
but this was totally different, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And I think I wasn't especially active at the time when I joined. So I think part of it was I'm moving, I'm doing something. Part of it was meeting a lot of really cool people, sort of similar to myself, sort of different, and making close friendships. Like I missed that aspect, when you're in college, you meet a lot of people, and then now I'm an adult and I'm working and you don't meet as many people. And so that was really wonderful, having this sense of community. But the sport itself, I mean, I did martial arts. I like a sort of physical sort of sport where like I don't mind getting hurt. I don't mind hitting people or having them hit me. Like I think that's exciting. I I used to, as a job when I was a teenager, be the like scorekeeper for like really small local hockey teams and, watching them check each other and everything. Like I like that sort of thing. And so I think learning a new skill, something that didn't come easy to me, but also I still made gains at, like was really satisfying. And I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, I do like hitting people. And the best thing is when they hit me and they fall down. That is the best feeling on earth. And I know a lot of other derby people who during the pandemic, particularly, they did a lot of outdoor skating and they like, trail skating and going to skate parks and all this stuff, or just going to roller rinks for fun, not during the pandemic. And for me, the skating is part of derby on its own. I'm kind of could take or leave it. I'm like, well, what's the point of skating if you don't get to hit people? I'm competitive. I hadn't typically been competitive at a sport, but I'd get competitive about other things. And this was a good outlet for that. So, yeah, I think all of those little things together, it's hard to say. It's got everything that appeals to me, that it's got theatricality, it's got a little bit of violence. I mean, in a good way. It's a contact sport. And it's got a wonderful community. I just really liked the people that I was with.
One of the things I really liked about your book, one aspect of it, was you described Millie as, like she was messing around with a friend for a really long time. And finally, it sort of kicked into her head that she wanted to be good at this thing, roller derby,
Yeah.
more than she wanted to, fool around with her friend. And it also was like, be connected to that friend. Because it sounds like there was a little bit of similarity to your entrance to roller derby in the sense like, you sort of joined it, like, I'll join the rec team and see what happens. And all of a sudden you're getting up at 7 a.m.
Yeah. I mean, I think that even the getting up at 7 a.m., some of Millie's fears, which I think she had worse than me or more dramatically than me, I still understand that fear of like, what if I try my hardest and I'm not any good?
Right.
Because I
Totally.
don't have a history of playing high school sports or college sports to draw on, of being like, this experience of it is terrifying to think my performance can let down my team members, And so I think that the feeling of doing something new successfully gets addictive. And I wanted to pursue that. But honestly, I think it took me a long time to completely get out of that mindset in smaller ways. And that, like, I'm not one of those people who complains when we have endurance drills at practice now, because I'm like, well, I want to have better endurance. This is how you do it. Like, I could choose not to be here. So I'm choosing this. I should do it and do it well. And, I try not to. I mean, it'd be really weird if I was goofing around and not listening as an adult. Like, I'm also a teacher, so like I really hate it. But, like that sense of like, if I'm going to be here and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do my best. For me, I also have a lot of like, I have to balance things because I'm really, really busy and I can't go to as many practices as I always want to, just because of, well, things like, oh, there's a practice today, but I am at a bookstore doing an event, or I travel for 2 months during the summer for work for my travel business. And that, obviously eliminates time. So I feel like, well, I love this. So when I am there, I really want to give it my all and not let my fear of failure get in my head. I may as well just try.
I think you brought up another really interesting point, is that balance between, you're doing this for fun, you're an adult,
Yeah.
but you also want to get better. And, at least for me, I enjoy the process of getting better, like figuring things out. But
Yeah.
like, you don't want to get too serious because, as you said, you don't have times to like, be a pro.
Yeah.
So like, where does that all fit in? And also, I think it's interesting when you have friends who just want to sort of goof around.
And I mean, I should say, one of my best friends in the sport is kind of she's not somebody who goofs around. Like we joined together. We're about the same skill level. She's been able to go more than me, and she's, as a consequence, gotten better than me, which I felt kind of sad about. But now I'm like, but no, but she goes more.
Right.
Like, good for her. This is, I want to see her succeed. I mean, at Roller Derby Champs, the Women's Flat Track Derby Association Championship was just last weekend, and I was watching it. And I mean, there's nothing more inspiring. Like, it's so great, and it makes me want to get better. But I'm aware that my rate of progress is going to be a little bit slower than somebody who could give their entire life over to Derby. And I'm trying to make peace with that, because there is a part of me that's like, no, do everything you can to get as good as Derby as possible. And I would have to say goodbye to other parts of my life that I love.
Yes.
And I'm not willing to do that. And so I'm like, I want to continue to improve, but I'm going to probably improve at a less dramatic rate than somebody else who can go more often, dedicate themselves to it more, not missing games because of traveling, not missing practices because, they just drove 12 hours and they're exhausted and not safe to skate or whatever. So, I mean, I think it's like for anybody in Derby, you kind of have to find that balance that feels right to you. I'm the captain of one of our 4 home teams this season. And so I'm kind of trying to figure out for the people on my team, like, hey, when we show up, we win games. We need to all show up to practice, but still knowing, I know you have lives. Some of you have kids, there's stuff going on, and like being accepting of that. I'm also working on that. So, yeah.
Right. Well, since we're sort of talking about this, what is the nitty gritty of your, I'm going to call it training schedule each week?
Yeah. So we have 3 practices a week, and I try to go to 2 of them, which generally is possible. After watching Champs, I'm like, I need to go to some of the earlier practices for the lower levels where I can just work on footwork too, because I need to get better footwork. So we'll have like a 3-hour stretch where the first 45 minutes is for brand new people kind of being worked in and learning things. And then the next 45 minutes is building on some of those basic skills and footwork, and usually non-contact or minimal contact. And then it's the last hour and a half where we're doing like lots of contact drills, and then sometimes ending with scrimmage. And that's typically 3 times a week, provided our access to our practice space isn't screwed up. And then in addition to that, I lift weights 2 or 3 times a week.
Good for you. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, I mean, in reality, it's probably 4 plus or minus 1. I mean, ideally 5, but sometimes less days a week of activity of some sort. And I'm trying to make peace with better to keep doing it and have imperfect weeks than think, oh, if I can't go 5 days a week or whatever, then I shouldn't do it.
I'm going to stop forever.
So,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, Derby certainly seems to be growing. Is that just my impression because I'm more familiar with it now, or has it been changing over the years?
I'm not sure, because a lot of leagues did suffer after the pandemic.
Oh,
There were
yeah.
a lot of leagues got
did, yeah.
smaller. I mean, it happened to us, but I think not as dramatically as it happened to a few other leagues that I know.
It seems like roller derby,
yeah.
because it's so, like, the community aspect of roller derby is so important that COVID really, did a number on it.
It was rough. Yeah. I think a lot of people moved or quit, or their lives changed, or, I'm not really sure, honestly.
Mhm.
Or the people who were doing the bulk of the admin moved or quit, which then affected the whole league.
Sure.
Because, a lot of things are volunteer based. None of us are getting paid to play the sport. So it's done for love, and it's not always an equal distribution of who's doing the work in a league. And so that gets tricky. But yeah, I don't know if it's growing or not. I feel like I'm at too close of a level to tell, because when the movie Whip It came out in 2009, everybody talks about the Whip It
Right.
bump. That
Right.
everybody, like, numbers were huge after Whip It, and it declined since then. But I do feel like it is on the upswing, at least in the last few years since the pandemic. Things are getting better. Things are feeling stronger. This is starting to feel like a first normal season of roller derby, because we were trying to get our numbers back up in the last couple years. So I feel cautiously optimistic that it's growing. I do know that it must be growing, because there were a bunch of international teams at the World Championships this year. World Championships used to just be US teams, maybe London, and maybe Victoria, Australia. And now we have teams from Sweden, multiple teams from France, Montreal. Like, it's more international, and that's really exciting.
Well, we started talking about politics right up the
Yeah.
front. So I'm going to say, I think a lot of women really like to, they want to hit something and be aggressive. And
Yeah.
as you mentioned, that's great in roller derby.
Yeah, and I think, again, summer 2020, really something I could have used right then.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, another thing about roller derby that has always impressed me, and you are going to have to speak to this because I can't quite figure it out. I don't play roller derby, is that it's so inclusive, but there's something, it's more than inclusive. I mean, something else is going on in how roller derby attracts like such a wide variety and really interesting group of people.
It really is, I think, a different base of people who come up as skaters. I'm not sure if it's because most, like one guess is that people do not generally learn about derby when they're kids. There are more and more junior leagues, but it's still, compared to something like soccer, like
Mm,
it's just not the same amount of exposure. And so the people who tend to find it, they tend to be a little bit older, and there tends to be a wider variety of places that they're coming from with respect to experience with sports. Um, eh, Background, I don't know. And I think also just kind of from the top down, yeah, there's missteps, but I think the Women's Flat Track Derby Association has really made a clear policy of being like, we're inclusive. We are, these are our policies with respect to trans skaters. These are our policies with respect to, I don't know, all sorts of other issues where they're like, this is the culture that is important to us that we want to create. And then individual member leagues, it tends to go that way. And I mean, I also feel like some of it is coming from this sort of counterculture scene of people who are maybe doing like things like being in punk bands or other
yeah.
sorts of things like that has lent a certain edge to it that appeals to a certain group of people that typical sports might not.
One of the things that I like to talk about on Hear Her Sports is how, at least again, because I'm old, when I was growing up, you could do gymnastics and skating and maybe tennis if you were a girl, and there really
Mm,
wasn't a lot else. But I think
yeah.
that's still in a way true. There are these sports that are considered, okay, this is okay for women. And a
Yeah.
lot of girls and women don't fit into that group of sports, and they throw up their hands and say, "Oh, I'm not sporty," because that's what they think
Yeah.
is available. And then
Yeah.
comes roller derby and they're like, "Wow."
Yeah, I mean, anything that involves hand-eye coordination, I really don't think I should be doing. And so, like I can remember being like softball in gym class and it just being miserable. And I mean, then I played on a rec league softball team with friends, like a, beer league sort of thing. And it was still, I'm still so terrible at this that it's almost not fun, even at this level. Like it's just rough. That's also, yeah, softball, soccer, those are like, I feel like the two big ones that a lot of girls play, maybe volleyball. They're all ball sports. They're all a certain skill set, different skill sets than each other, but it's not the only way to play a team sport. And I mean, even within roller derby, one of the things I like is that there's not like one, like, unlike you mentioned, like skating and gymnastics, there is no ideal roller derby body type,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Like, there's advantages and disadvantages no matter what your size, your agility, your weight, height, all that stuff. Well, agility, obviously, it's better to be more agile, but the rest of it, I mean, I'm tall, I'm kind of heavy. It's great to just have jammers face me and just be like defeated just by looking at the back of me. It's awesome. But on the other hand, and I've blocked jammers who are my size, and it just puts the fear of God in me, because like people coming super fast at me and they're 5'9" and over 200 pounds, it's like I see my death in their eyes. So, it's great. And on the other hand, there's people who are tiny and wiry who are jammers and can slip through spaces, but there's also really tiny blockers who can get and stick on people in a way that I couldn't and be really nice and low and have control over them. So, yeah, it is a lot more diverse in terms of body types, and not just in a feel good, we want to include everyone way, but in a legitimately adding to the success of the sport and the level of the sport.
Hi, just a quick word. When you tell your friends about Hear Her Sports, a great place to direct them is to the Spotify playlists. They are all easy to find from the main menu on our website at hearhersports.com. The playlists include a few favorites: aging well, nutrition, Paris Olympics, and cycling. Once you are on the website, it's easy to explore all of the episodes. Each guest has her own show notes page that includes a short bio and links to topics discussed on the show. Sharing Hear Her Sports with others is one of the greatest impact actions you can do for us. So thank you.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
And now, let's get back to Elizabeth Holden, the author of the roller derby YA novel, Mighty Millie Novak. So we've talked about sort of, I don't know, the aggression of the sport, and you talked about liking to hit people. Let's talk about injury, and I'm really curious about the reality versus the hype. And this was something that you addressed in the book through Millie's mom, who kept on talking about how dangerous the sport was. And, I even got the feeling that she was sort of saying, this doesn't look good for you to be playing roller derby. So can you talk about that?
I mean, I do think there are injuries. It's a contact sport. I broke my ankle when I was a rookie, it's not ideal. We're always trying to look at how are we practicing? We're tracking injuries. We're trying to make sure that what can we do to minimize injuries and take it really seriously. But I also think that people tend to see it as somehow more risky than a lot of other sports. But you can break your ankle in plenty of other sports. You can get a concussion in plenty of other sports. I mean, anybody whose kids are playing football, any high school boys playing football, I feel like that's 1,000 times riskier than derby. I do think, there are some inherent risks in it. And for somebody where, for example, their livelihood depends on their ability to be on two legs all the time, maybe that's not worth the risk for them at this point in their life, just because there is an inherent amount of risk from what we're doing. But I think it's a smaller amount of risk than you'd think. And I think plenty of sports have that risk, and it's just the wheels that make it look scarier. But it's also something that I'm comfortable with, this level of risk at this point. I broke my ankle as a rookie, but I've been playing for 9 years and I've had one ankle break, and I could not get back on skates fast enough. And it now makes me really appreciate my ankle and how it healed. So, I mean, I think that I'd be lying if I said it's perfectly safe. No one ever gets hurt seriously, because stuff does happen. But I think that we're all trying to make it as safe as we can and be responsible and proactive about that and taking data on it. And there's a lot of ways to hurt yourself. And this seems like a worthwhile risk to me, especially because there's also risk to not being active and doing something that's good for you physically and mentally, I remember I was not especially active. I was in my early 30s, and I was going dancing, and I pulled something in my leg getting out of the car after I parked. And I was just like, well, this is a bad sign, so stuff happens.
Yeah. I will also, I want to sort of emphasize that there's risk for injury in most sports. I spent a long time cycling, and there's certainly a lot of risk for injury in that. And then I started playing squash, which, from the outside looks very tame, and I almost immediately broke a finger. So,
oh my gosh. Yeah, I didn't. That's wild. Yeah.
We talked about inclusivity, you joined, it sounds like, pretty easily, for people listening. Is it something that anybody can show up to?
Most leagues, especially because we don't have people who learned as teenagers, most leagues have some sort of on-ramp program because they want people to be able to join without much experience. And so I joined the rec team and was able to learn how to play. And then about a year after being on the rec team, I tried out for one of our home teams and was able to make it on there. And so at this point, with the size of our league, we're kind of at a point where we maybe can't quite take everyone onto one of our home teams. Our league structure is complicated, and I don't need to get into the weeds with it here. But there's now a point where anybody who wants to skate we will teach you how to play. You can progress at the rate that feels right for you. We're not going to be like, you need to get good by this date. And if not, you're out of here. You can stay at a lower level and just keep practicing. You can stay non-contact, if you're just decide I'm not quite ready for getting hit yet, as long as you want. And then once we are like, hey, you are at a safe level to start playing in games. Yeah. Then you can be going for an empty spot on a home team or playing with like one of our lower level travel teams and then working your way up, so there's always options for kind of wherever you're at. And I mean, I think with anything with team sports, there's always going to be a debate about exactly how we make these decisions. Each league is going to be doing it a little bit differently. The size of the league also matters. If you're at a small league, it takes almost nothing for them. They're like, oh, you're safe, cool, play, we need you, versus a bigger league where they can be a little bit more choosy. But I think wherever you're at with your skill, you can play. But like any team sport, there will be decisions about who's actually representing certain teams in certain games.
Which I also loved in your book. I mean, that was part of the, some
yeah.
of the things that went on. Yeah, that was cool.
And I also wanted to go back to something I forgot to mention before about safety, which is cross training, which I made sure to put in my book because I think that's important for safety, is making sure you're strong enough to do derby. Everybody talks about how when you first join derby, new derby people say, this is going to be my exercise. And then anybody who sticks around says, no, I go to the gym and cross train and do exercise so I can play derby.
Well, I love that you mentioned strength training for yourself, but also, in the book and just now, because that bit about Millie being in the gym, I hope I'm not giving too much of this away, but sorry, folks.
I think you're doing great. Yeah.
Okay.
I once completely spoiled the very end on a podcast and had to like email them later that day going, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Please cut it out.
Well, that's funny. Well, I loved how Millie discovered her muscles, which I think is so amazing about strength training. It's actually one of the main reasons I like strength training, because there's this one-to-one relationship between lifting regularly and being committed to it and getting stronger. It's not like VO2 max. Well, like who knows what your VO2 max is.
Yeah. I mean, I was just talking about this with a friend that like, I love knowing that like, look, as long as I continue to go to the gym and continue to lift weights, I'm going to get stronger. The weights are getting heavier. I know I must be getting stronger. It's in the numbers. And I feel like for me, because I went through periods of fixating on my weight in a very negative, obsessive way, fixating on numbers in terms of the weights I can lift is so much a more positive and emotionally, mentally healthy thing for me. And I mean, it makes it something a lot more sustainable too.
I also like it because, like I can feel great and lift 45 pounds in the gym, and I can feel like crap and lift 45 pounds, but it's always 45 pounds. So it's like this really objective measure.
Yeah.
So I can't I can't start playing games with myself saying, well, I'm not really stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a good point. Yeah. And I mean, for me, I'm also thinking about it like just from a life perspective. I lift weights because I have a 3-legged greyhound and I want to be able to safely carry him up and down the stairs and not even think about his weight. So I need to lift much heavier than my dog at the gym. And I'm 42. My plan is to like, by the time I hit menopause, they'll be like, her bones are so dense, we don't even know what to do. So right. I'm like trying to think of it from that perspective and not just derby. I also have chronic joint pain, and I find that getting my muscles stronger really helps with that too. So
sure. Let's talk a little bit about competition. And in the book again, I knew that we would be talking a lot about the book throughout. In the book, again, you talk about nerves before competing and handling those. And I thought that was a really interesting thing because I don't think it's discussed enough that everybody gets nervous. And there's certain, there's a service that those nerves do. It's just a matter of, okay, how am I going to use those?
Yeah.
And even the pros are getting nervous.
Yeah. I know one of the people who'd been with our league the longest, one of our best jammers, I remember her telling me the day I stopped getting nervous before a game is the day I shouldn't be doing this anymore, because being this nervous means I care so much about this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's when I realized I should stop cycling. Yeah.
I'm still working on it, like on a personal note. Like I get a little too nervous. I'm like, I need to, and it's actually been helpful being captain because I can focus a little bit more on like being there for my teammates as opposed to getting completely in my head. But like, I'm still a work in progress on the nerves, because I think I tend towards anxiety anyway. But yeah, I think that I'm not ever going to eliminate it entirely. So I'm working on how can I use this productively.
Right. And for me, it's a matter of acknowledging it and sort of thinking like, why am I nervous? What is this doing? And, oftentimes I realize that I'm worried about the result.
Yeah, I know. I do think that too. I'm like, well, I'm nervous because I want to win, and then I'm like, okay, but I've lost plenty of games. This is like, there's a few hundred people watching, yeah, but it's not life. This is not life or death. And also, I like the other team. I like the people we're playing. This is not something crucial. Like I obviously want to win very badly, but I don't need to be. I don't need to have election day nerves for something as joyous as a roller derby bout.
Right, right. And also, like, what are the nerves serving?
Yeah.
Oftentimes I think that it's like, okay, are these nerves going to make me faster or better, or is it just going to make things so much worse?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a tough balance to figure out. So I'm still working on it myself, but I do think, yeah, it is a reality. And I think everyone still gets nervous because, like, I mean, like we were saying, like, if you didn't, what does that mean? That you're like indifferent to it? But part of the fun of it is caring. And if you care that much, you're going to be nervous.
Right, right. What do you think about confidence?
I think that as far as I can tell, it matters a lot on a team level. Like, just having watched these games at Champs last weekend online, like, you can just see when the tides turn, everybody starts playing better. Their heads, their mental state, and their confidence, obviously their skills have to be there, but you can just tell when people are confident, they play better. And when a team is confident, they perform better. And I know that personally, I play better when I'm feeling good and strong, and like, success begets success. And when I'm having a crummy day and I'm struggling physically, then I get in my head about it and it gets worse. And I mean, that's not 100% true all the time. And I think you can work on that and build confidence in different ways. And I think part of gaining confidence comes from practicing and being able to be like, I can be confident because I know I've gone to a bunch of practices and I've done this a bunch, and I'm, building that skill. So there's a cyclical relationship there. You get the confidence from doing it, but you
Sure.
do it better when you have the confidence. So
Do you practice confidence or discuss confidence with the team?
what I mostly keep repeating is, we will feel good when we practice together. The more we're on the track together, the more we're going to feel good. The more we feel good, the better we're going to play. But I mean, my main goal for this season is make my teammates show up. So we had a losing streak. The last time we won a game was January of 2020. Now, we had a long break because of COVID, but still, we finally won a game in October, and I cried. I was so happy. And so my goal was like, can we just win a game this season? And it was our first game of the season, and we won. And it was, I mean, such a high. So, I mean, I think that what I'm trying to, I don't know how to just get confidence by itself, like just out of nowhere. I think that if you have experiences that you can be like, oh, hey, I did this good thing. Oh, hey, I did this and I got better at it. And then bring that to mind and build that confidence using that. It can be hard to just be like, oh, just be confident because I said so. Doesn't do much. But if you can be like, look, I used to be bad at this sport and now I've gotten pretty good, and I can tell I've gotten, I can see my own improvement, and I can tell, hey, these newer people, I'm better than them. I can see these gains. I need to be confident that's going to continue. So yeah, I think confidence just on its own for no reason can be tough, but tying it to other stuff and then reminding people of that, I think, is useful. But I'm also just talking off the cuff here. So,
no, I think that's excellent
yeah.
because I personally have really struggled with the word confidence, because to me, the word and the way it's used sounds like it is this isolated thing, and then you're going to have it and
Yeah.
all is
Yeah.
good. And
Yeah.
as you said, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's cyclical. And I think the more I do stuff that goes well and I can draw on that and be like, oh, I do know how to play this. I have a history of doing this. I can remember that. That's going to make me more confident than just being like, believe in yourself. You can do anything. So.
But I do think that there's an empowerment that happens in sports because you learn that your body is so capable. And there's something that does transfer in my mind to, like this powerful use of a body to mental
Yeah.
confidence.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's part of the contact sport act for me, that just this feeling of like using my body in this way, as opposed to like I teach physics and I write and I do some travel business stuff. So basically it's very cerebral and I'm on screens a lot and I'm just thinking, and it can be really easy for my head and my body to feel like two separate things. And so being out on the track, you're in the moment, you're using your body in this physical way and making gains with it. And it sort of puts me in myself more, as opposed to just thinking about things and then seeing my body as this separate thing that I can think about. Do I wish it was smaller? Do I wish it was shaped different? As if it's not me. And I like that integration of my thoughts and my body and using it in this way, and challenging myself and pushing myself and seeing that growth.
But it also allows you to, and I don't mean you, but it allows a person to realize that all those body parts that you hate, actually have a function. They do something and they do a good job at it.
Yeah, that it's not that our bodies are not just there to be looked at, but like to do things and to be able to move my body and do things with it and hit people with it or whatever, and like it just feels so much healthier and so much more right than seeing my body in isolation as a separate thing,
Yeah. I think that's why I related to Millie discovering that she had muscles.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. A lot of
wow.
people have mentioned really liking that scene, which I'm glad. So,
Yeah. What are your goals for the book?
I mean, at this point, I'm just so glad it's out. It was like the moments leading up to its launch in August, I was just so nervous, and I knew I didn't need to be, but you are. And I'm just so happy it's out. And I think I just want as many people as possible to read it, because I want to hear from them. And I hope that, obviously, like, I joke that it's roller derby propaganda and I want people to join derby because they read it. Like, that's one thing. That's a hope for the book, is that people are like, I should join roller derby. This sounds good. I've never played a team sport, but maybe I could. I didn't mean to rhyme. But so, I think one goal is for the book to lead people into sports or physical things that they might not have seen possible for themselves. Another goal for the book is obviously, hey, I want it to reach a wider audience and make me money so I can keep writing, to be honest, in that way,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm just happy to have it out, and I'm happy people are reading it and saying nice things about it. And I think those are the main things.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of like, being a writer, everything is out so slowly. So now, like, my brain is whole shifted on this other novel that I'm editing. So I'm like, Millie exists. Cool. Good. Do your thing, Millie. Like, I don't have to worry about you.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything that you wanted to add before we sign off?
Oh, I don't think so. I will say this. If anyone listening is like, maybe I do want to play roller derby, but I wouldn't know how to find a place, I have a standing invitation. You can email me and I will find you the nearest roller derby league near you and help you figure out how to go to practices. So
that is awesome.
Please feel free to.
And I will include your email in the show notes.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thanks very much.
Oh, thank you so much. It was great to talk to you.
That wraps up today's episode with Elizabeth Holden, roller derby player and the author of the YA novel Mighty Millie Novak. To order the book, go to hearhersports.com/bookshop, or you can get there from this episode's show notes page. If you want to know more about roller derby, listen to episode 101 with Erica Vanstone, who, when we recorded in 2021, was the executive director of the Women's Flat Track Derby Association, the international governing body for the sport of roller derby. Now she is the chief executive officer of the same organization. Thank you for listening. Hear Her Sports is one of the few podcasts that give female athletes and women in sport the time and space to talk about what's important to them and about their sports. It's a perfect way to get to know the female athletes you love and to meet new ones. It's a pleasure to be part of a community of women's sports fans together with you. And until next time, bye-bye.
Have you ever wanted to know how to win a Formula One Grand Prix? I mean, really know. Know about the driver tactics from the cockpit, the strategy calls from the pit wall, and even the mind games in the paddock. There's a lot more that goes into winning a Grand Prix than just 90 minutes of racing. So every week on the F1 Strategy Report, we're taking a deep dive into the decisions that shape every result. Hey there, my name is Michael Laminato, and every week I'm joined by an expert guest from the paddock to talk through the big calls that won the race and the missteps that resulted in bitter defeat. Before every race, we'll look back at the previous year's result and consult the current form guide, and we'll be in your feed after every Grand Prix dissecting the outcome and what it means for the championship. So for your regular hit of Formula One analysis, subscribe to the F1 Strategy Report wherever you get your favourite podcasts. The Strategy Report is a Beer Mogul podcast on the Evergreen Podcasts network. My name's Michael Laminato, and I'll catch you after the checkered flag.